So, welcome back and thank you for sticking with us. I know this is the workshop 5, but I can assure you this is the most fun. I've been talking to the panelists and it's definitely the most fun panel of the day. We're going to be talking about how can global fashion save our planet. But before we get into all that interesting nitty-gritty, we have a message from Miguel, a representative of the United Nations Climate Neutral Now initiative about fashion.
Hello, my name is Miguel Naranjo, and I am Program Officer with the UNFCCC Secretariat, also known as UN Climate Change. I want to thank One Carbon World for the invitation to join you in this session on the topic of fashion. I apologize that I was not able to join you, at least live, virtually, but live, but we're in the middle of our climate change conference, COP26. Fashion is an area, it's an industry that has interested the Secretariat for some time. 3 years ago, we established a Fashion Charter for Global Climate Action, which is an initiative coordinated by the Secretariat in collaboration with many players in the fashion or garment industry globally. The overall goal of this collaboration is obviously, or as you can expect, to drive action on climate and more generally on sustainability in the sector. Now, the first thing is I would invite you to learn more about this initiative and consider joining it. The information is on our website, in the Global Climate Action area of the UNFCCC website. In addition to that, a little bit about why the sector, the fashion or garment sector, needs to take action on climate. Well, it's not just about doing what is right. It's not just about protecting the planet, biodiversity, future generations. It is also about the business bottom line. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development said many years ago, decades ago, business cannot succeed in a society that fails. Our society is currently moving fast towards failure. If our society collapses, if our societal institutions, the ones that allows us to interact constructively and peacefully, collapse, then business will also collapse. Business will not be possible. We are facing a very difficult situation where we may not be able to continue to run a society that works as we have been used until now. Therefore, acting on climate and wider sustainability is not just because it's a nice thing to do or the right thing to do. It is a necessity. It is part of it must be part of the strategic thinking for business continuity of any company. With that clear, the fashion sector has enormous potential to help us move towards the society that we need. You have a very long supply chain that covers almost all countries around the world. If the fashion industry takes a leadership role in showing how the transformation to sustainability and climate sustainability, climate neutrality is done, and if you put not only your example, but you also put pressure, encourage your supply chain, your suppliers, your business partners to do the same, the impact can be very big. If we are going to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, you need to do that. We all need to do that. The fashion sector is obviously not the only one that is going through this process and that has to face some challenges to get to where it needs to be in terms of sustainability. Every other sector in our society is going through the same process. So the message is we are all on this together and we all must contribute to achieving the solution or we won't. So we encourage you to use this session to learn more about what it means for fashion to become more sustainable and climate friendly. Join the Fashion Charter of the UNFCCC for your industry and take seriously what action on climate and sustainability means, putting it at the center and front of everything that you do. Again, sustainability and climate action is not just a nice thing to do. It's not just a tool to market your brand. It is at the very core of your strategy, or it must be at the very core of your strategy to ensure that your company will continue to be able to do business. With that, I hope again that the session will be very useful, and we look forward to hearing about the outcome. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Miguel. That was a really good introduction to our session. So I should introduce myself. I'm Professor Mark Mazin. I'm an Earth Systems scientist, and I'm here at COP26 in Glasgow. I am in the center of the madness, and I have been going in and seeing all of the negotiations through the first week. But I think it's really important that you realize that the reason why I got to chair this is because I'm the least fashionable chair out of all the people that they could have chosen. So I'm going to learn as much as you, and we have three incredible speakers, all who are changing and revolutionizing the fashion industry in their own way. Again, I think that, as Miguel said, we all need to support the UN Climate Change Charter on climate action, and particularly with the fashion industry, which has a really bad reputation, not always justified. Again, the fashion industry has already signed up to say that we will have net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which is in line with the Paris Agreement. But of course, that also includes a 30% reduction by 2030. But you have countries like the USA saying they're going to reduce by 50% by 2030. So there's a lot of room to actually encourage and actually drive forward the actual fashion industry. So it's really part of our environmental and sustainable future, as well as all of us looking really good. So I'm going to introduce the first panelist. Oh, no, I'm not. I apologize. I've got to tell you all about Slido. So Slido questions from the audience have been incredible this day, and actually please will you actually look at the sort of QR code and actually put that on your phone and actually send in as many questions as you like. We will sort them out, put them together if they're very similar, and that will give me lots of ammunition to ask questions of our panelists. So now, having actually ticked off that box, I can move on to actually introducing Sue from New Look. Now, New Look began in 1969 as a single fashion store in the United Kingdom. From there, they've grown to be one of the largest leading fast fashion brands in the world, with about 467 stores across the UK, and their online platform serves customers in 66 countries and over 225 million visits in the last year. So, Sue, over to you. We are looking forward to hearing from you.
I hope you're going to show us a video, yeah.
That should come up now.
Here we go.
Right.
So yeah, go on. I was just going to say thank you for the opportunity, Mark, for being able to be on the panel today.
Look, the stuff you do is absolutely amazing. We've seen that in the video. I mean, for me, always what I'm interested in is the origin story. I mean, how did New Look, that went from sort of like a classic early 70s fashion brand, suddenly become this leader in sustainability?
I think we'll be very similar to many people that are listening into to this panel today, in that sustainability started, I think, probably with the emergence of ethical trade. And we've got a 20-year history and quite a mature program around our ethical trade program. But I think as far as environmental sustainability and looking at corporate social responsibility, I think that was later. So I think it came within the last 20 years, and we've been building. So I think if we look back over the last 3 years, the realization that actually we needed to do more. I think you've talked a lot about actually that is the starting point, actually identifying that to be a responsible retailer, you need to understand what your impacts actually are, and be able to understand what we're going to do to manage those impacts and reduce them. So I think my answer to that would be, we started a long time ago, the realization that we need to do more, and then keeping it simple. So actually being able to understand where we can actually have an impact, where we're having an impact, where we want to do more. Engage with your whole business. I think that's the other message, is that we were really identifying pockets of good that were happening across our business. Colleagues want to work for a business that is responsible. Customers, actually the insight is growing. Well, I think I was quite disappointed when we first started that customers were probably not as aware as they are today, but that insight has showing us that awareness is really growing, and the customers now wanting to be buying responsible products from responsible retailers. Stitching together those pockets of good, whether that be our energy team, who actually went a huge way to actually delivering in the first instance the neutrality piece, but actually obviously now we're looking at how we're going to set those science-based targets to look towards a decarbonisation strategy. We also then worked with our buying teams to engage with them as to how we buy more responsibly our raw materials. And I think the other piece really to think about is actually the management. You mentioned the strategic initiative, and I think that's really key, that actually you can't really purely build this from bottom up. You need to have a management structure and a strategic approach that says actually this is the business that we want to be, and I think that's really key.
I mean, I have to say, I think that your point about sort of the public catching up with companies like yours is really relevant, because we've seen from COP26 this huge amount of interest now, and it's almost like the three of you have led the world and suddenly everybody's trying to play catch up, which is fantastic. So you've done incredibly well, but again, you're looking to the future as always. What do you see as the big challenges for your company in this space? I mean, what are the things that sort of like you're going, I have no idea how I'm going to deal with that?
So I think the way to approach that really is the fact that actually we're now talking a new language. We are now talking about science, and we're talking about sustainability being something which we need to understand the impact through our entire value chain. We were very clear that our what we call our tier one, the principal point of manufacture, there's been a lot of focus on that, but actually looking further and further upstream in your value chain, and now actually starting to look downstream at what happens to the product once you've sold the product. I think it's the joining up of that entire value chain that's important. I think the other piece really is around the science behind it. So the fact that we talk scope 1 and scope 2, the things that we can directly influence, the things we directly procure. Now scope 3, which is actually where most of our climate emissions, our greenhouse gases will be emitted, the production of textiles, the logistical movement of goods, the use of goods once we've sold them, basically. So I think actually converting that, we have signed up to science-based targets. We're going to spend a lot of time now actually identifying our roadmap to delivery, and I think that's the one thing I would say to people. You have to start somewhere, and actually taking the good work that we may have done done, and now saying, okay, well, what more do we now need to do? Regardless of the size of business you are, you can have an impact on the way in which you procure and sell your goods, and the relationship that you have with your customers.
So one very quick question before I move on to Edard. What value does that give to your company, being sustainable? If you can sum that up in a sentence.
I think the biggest value is for the people who buy want us to make it easy for them to buy responsibly. The people who work with me, my colleagues, basically, we all want to work for a business that's responsible. And then, of course, the people that invest in our business. And you only got to see what was going on at COP26 this week. Basically, it was all about investment and where the money is going and how we're going to finance this, basically. So clearly, people are going to want to invest in people that are doing the right thing as well.
Brilliant answer, and I completely agree, and we'll come back to you. Right, moving on to our second panelist, Edard. Now, Edard co-founded with Michael Sheep Included Limited, or Sheep Inc. And now I'm going to have to do this, so I'm putting on the beanie, okay? I've got it on. So Sheep Inc. is a contemporary knitwear brand that has a positive impact on the world. Their raw materials are carbon negative. I know that, I've checked it. And their manufacturing is completely powered by solar energy. This makes them a pioneer in the world, as their process naturally saves and stores more carbon than it creates. Now, the other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to thank Sheep Inc. because they supported our charity celebrity football match yesterday, which was raising awareness of climate anxiety in young people. Hence why I got a free beanie, because I'm counted as a celebrity. So, Edard, welcome. Can you please tell us a bit more about Sheep Inc.'s mission and its vision for sustainability?
Well, I think that compared to a company like New Look, we really started, I suppose, with a blank sheet of paper. We're only 2 years old, and I set up a previous fashion business. And during that time, really started to see the impact of fashion on the environment, and started to explore basically how you could put down a kind of like a better product proposition, basically, that would both resonate with customers and would also really pave a new way forward for how a fashion brand can behave. And yeah, at the time, I partnered up with, as you mentioned, Michael, my co-founder, and we sat down with a blank sheet of paper, and we went, what does a brand of tomorrow look like? How does it behave, and how does it do business? And after a lot of research, we worked with this group in Copenhagen called the Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design. It did a lot of demographical research to figure out what sits at the core of this problem. Like, why are people not buying more sustainably? Why is fashion not behaving more sustainably? And it came down to really one key thing, which was visibility. And so many fashion brands just don't have full visibility of their supply chain, and customers don't have full visibility of actually what's happening from the brands that they buy from. And so that was the piece that we really started with. And then we took our supply chain, and then we went, okay, listen, if we want to create a fashion brand of tomorrow, how does that actually look? Like, how does your supply chain look, and what output should you be having as a business? And what we did through analyzing every single aspect of the supply chain, we were able to, as you mentioned, have a naturally carbon negative impact. And the way that we do that is probably important to say is like we sell merino wool knitwear, and we sell basically a bunch of sweater styles. And what we did is first of all, we went to the raw material, as the beanie you have. And we went to, we first of all started at the farm stage, and we worked specifically with farms in New Zealand that have adopted regenerative farming methods. And through that, they really are kind of basically at the cutting edge of farming. Through those methods, they're able to naturally sequester more CO2 than gets produced on farm. And then basically we took every single additional step in the supply chain, and we went, how can we now optimize for impact? And as you mentioned, we scoured the wool, so cleaned the wool in Italy at the first B Corp textile factory in Europe. We then spin it with our yarn suppliers called Suitvolle, which is done with renewable energy. And then we work with a group called, we work with a manufacturer in Portugal called Fatextil, who have solar powered manufacturing. And all our garments are then made using these machines called Shimaseki whole garment knitting machines, which create no waste. And again, they once again, they all run on solar power. And then our logistics warehouse here and our 3PL here in the UK is then also a carbon neutral warehouse. So it was really about taking every single aspect of the supply chain and basically optimizing it for impact. But the real piece came with this idea of what does visibility then mean and how do you crack visibility? So even though we'd adopted what is actually comparable to the rest of fashion, a very different approach. We'd started at the beginning and then gone all the way through. Traditionally, fashion comes a bit from the manufacturer and then goes backwards, which also accounts for why there's such a lack of transparency going further back. But because we'd done it that way up, we were able to obviously have full visibility. But the question would then also, how do we make sure that visibility is accessible for the customers? And how do they make sure that we're also actually doing what we say we're doing? So what we did is we then built a technology layer on top of our supply chain that plugs into all our suppliers, and we're able to pull all the kind of crucial information from every single piece of garment that we create. So when was the wool dyed? When was it spun? When was it created? Who knitted the garment, etc. And we have all those pieces of information that we then store in a database. And then when the customer gets it, they have this little tag on the sweater that they can scan with their phone, and they can see the entire history of the garment's creation, including also the obviously the impact at every stage of manufacturing, which has all been third-party audited. So we make sure it's not us doing the talking, but we make sure that it is an independent party that's come in. And then most funnily, we not only give people full visibility of their supply chain, but we also connect them on a sheep from the same farm, connect them with a sheep from the same farm that their sweater's wool is from. And that idea is really to kind of bring people back in touch, you know, to make them think about the journey that these garments take before they get to you. Because I think visibility is a big thing, but it's like transparency is not inherently that interesting, right? It's like, as a consumer, you come and you get this kind of factual regurgitation of the creation of the garment, but there's not a lot of emotional value attached to that. And that's not going to lead the charge for consumer change, right? The way that the consumer change starts to happen, if people become interested in the stories, they start to take an interest and they start to really kind of query where things have come from, the impact, the journey that they've taken. So the adopt the sheep and the connecting with the sheep on farm is a way of really kind of getting people to think about that journey. And it's obviously also a really fun thing to be able to show friends. You can kind of, again, on the garment, you scan it with your phone and you can see exactly where it is on the farm and you get all kinds of information around it. And so that's really was for us the journey that we've had so far. On top of that, what we've also introduced is an investment method that invests supply chain insetting, basically, insetting investments. So what we do is we, again, analyze the impact of our farms, and we do that on about 12, 13 points. And we can then see exactly where they're basically not quite, maybe where they can be performing better. And we then take a percentage of our revenue and invest in projects that basically counter that specific impact. So it really is kind of data-led investments within our own supply chain, rather than adopting a plant a tree somewhere in the world policy. We really want to make sure that our own supply chain is as clean as possible.
Brilliant. And what was great was that you actually answered all three questions in one coherent sentence. Absolutely. I mean, again, I could listen to you all day, so I have to say that was brilliant. And as you know, unfortunately, I am a bit of a fanboy. So, look, they are. So I've got
your sheep
on. Yes. Okay. So
do you remember what you called your sheep?
Sorry? I can't remember my sheep's name. Look, I can barely remember my children's name, okay? Not let alone my sheep. And I've got about 4 of your jumpers, so I've got 4 sheep to look after. So we're going to move on now, and we are going to move on to Laura, who is at the CSR manager at Mud Jeans. So Mud Jeans strives to lead by example and to find an alternative to the fast fashion status quo by taking the most beloved pieces of your wardrobe, your jeans, and making them sustainable and circular. Their goal is to revolutionize the fashion industry. Mud Jeans is grounded on the circular business model, meaning that the entire business and how they are producing their products is focused on eliminating waste, which is fantastic, and concentrating on positive, wider benefits. Right, so welcome. Why did you have this incredible mission? How did Mud Jeans come about? Okay, it's not on the list, but yeah, let's have a video.
Hi, my name is Laura Vicaria, and I'm the CSR manager of Mud Jeans. Mud Jeans is a circular denim brand. We are pioneers in circular denim. Put simply, we make our new jeans out of old jeans we collected back from our customers. We're very excited to participate in this One Carbon World event to highlight the fantastic work that they're doing, and also the critical role that businesses have to play in this fight against climate change. Mud Jeans has been carbon neutral since 2016. At the beginning of 2021, we had the fantastic opportunity to receive a grant from One Carbon World. With this, we were able to refresh our Scope 1 and 2 emission calculations and verify our LCA Scope 3 calculations. Additionally, we could apply the carbon credits that came along with this grant towards achieving our carbon positive status, meaning that we were able to go beyond offsetting our own impact. Mud Jeans has worked hard towards continuously reducing our CO2 impact. We have gone from making a pair of jeans that consumes on average 7.62 kilograms of CO2 equivalent back in 2016 to today producing a pair of jeans that consumes 6.10 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. Compared to industry standard, that is a 74% difference of impact. We have set clear goals to continuously reduce our CO2 impact, both for next year and up to 2030. What these numbers show is that circular and sustainable fashion really have an important role to play in the fight against climate change. Thank you.
Well, I'm very glad we didn't miss that video. You know, perhaps I should read my notes even better than usual. So can I start off with the real question, which is, how did this vision come about? Because what makes a fashion guru wake up one morning and go, it's jeans, that's the problem?
Yeah, of course. Well, you know, it all started with Bert van Saun. He is the founder of Mud Jeans. And his inspiration really came from many years already working in the fashion industry. And as you said in the very beginning, the fashion industry just has a very dark side. And witnessing all of that, he decided to create a brand that would demonstrate through action that there is an alternative to the current way of doing fashion. Why jeans? Well, jeans is a product that is extremely relatable. Whether you like fashion or you don't, everyone has a pair of jeans in their closet. So it makes the fight against fast fashion and also the whole climate challenge that goes along with the fast fashion industry very relatable. But also simultaneously, the denim industry is very symbolic of the dirty side of the fashion industry. So it's actually one of the most polluting items in your wardrobe due to the fact that it's entirely made out of cotton. So it requires a lot of water, a lot of CO2, a lot of toxic chemicals, and you know, also the people behind it, the cotton pickers, the garment workers. In the past, it has had a really negative history and reputation. So by taking that garment and making it not only sustainable but circular, we're demonstrating that, hey, it is very much possible to do things differently. And we also challenge this idea of ownership with circularity. So with our business model and the way that we sell our product, we tell our customers, hey, wear your jeans, love them, enjoy them. But once you're done wearing them, we actually want that material back so that we can recycle it and reincorporate it into production.
I mean, I think that's incredible, because I think when I talk to waste managers, one of the things that they get frustrated about is it doesn't matter which product, nobody designs the product to think about the recycling element or the disposal of. So when you actually get this material and you get it back, how do you actually reincorporate it in? And also, how does the customer get the jeans to you once they've worn through?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Those are great questions. Well, it all starts with our business model, which is the lease a jeans model. So our customers can lease our jeans for a period of 12 months. Again, here the idea is to give our customers the possibility to experience having a new pair of jeans without the environmental anxiety that goes with having a new product. Hey, I want to buy something new, but it's going to have an impact on the planet, and I'm going to create waste. And we say, okay, look, actually, if you buy our jeans, they have 74% less CO2 consumption and 93% less water consumption. And once you're done wearing them, you can actually send them back to us. We collect everything, and that's sent to Spain. In Spain, then our jeans are shredded into fibers, and this fiber is then blended in back with GOTS certified organic cotton to make the yarn, and then that yarn is turned into a fabric, and then that fabric is turned into a brand new pair of jeans. So at the moment, we're using up to 40% post-consumer recycled cotton in our jeans, and that is a really, really high standard. And in so doing, we're just saving a lot of jeans from incineration or ending up in a landfill. And I think what's really key here is that us as a brand, we are taking responsibility over our own waste and making sure that our own product is being circular and in a loop continuously. And that's what's really unique about Mud Jeans, that we take that responsibility. Of course, it's great to go out there and maybe use old bed sheets and use other resources from somewhere else to make a product. That is fantastic that people are going out there and doing that. But it's also about encouraging businesses to start taking responsibility over the impact that they are creating on the planet, and also the waste that they are creating. And most importantly, to start learning how to live within the planetary boundaries. And circularity is all about that, because you're really not only using your resources more efficiently, but more effectively. So that if you're able to use recycled content in your product, then you're able to stop taking that virgin material from the earth, and so using your materials in a more effective way. And in so doing, you're protecting biodiversity, you're protecting your water consumption, your CO2 consumption. There's so many benefits to developing your business with circularity in mind.
Absolutely brilliant. I have to say, I think my wife will fall in love with Mud Jeans, because I think she and I have different opinions on jeans. I wear my jeans until they literally fall off me, because actually I think that's when they look the coolest, whereas she's about 12 months ahead of me. So she'll be sending them back to you without me knowing. So I think that's absolutely.
And then you can just get the new pair, so.
Yeah, and then I look all new. And I'm not sure I like that look, but no, that's fantastic. I think Mud Jeans are absolutely brilliant. So guess what, guys? This is where you all have to actually jump in and help me out, because if you get me to answer the fashion questions, this is going to go really badly wrong. So I have some incredible questions from sort of like the public, and I'm going to start off with the general discussion. So one of the questions that's been sent in is clearly someone who works in the fashion industry. They're a tiny local fashion brand, and their challenge is the balance of costs, good material, low carbon material. And it's this, I think this is a really interesting issue, because actually starting up a business and trying to make it actually cost effective is really difficult. And sometimes people perceive that sustainability and all this stuff is actually more costly. Can you help this person out? Because I really think we need to support these new businesses.
Well, I'll jump in here, guys. Sorry.
Please do. Yes, absolutely. Go for it.
It is a reality that the fashion industry, sustainable fashion, is more expensive. If you look at our jeans, they cost 119 euros. And that's because it reflects the true cost of that product. The people behind it, they're being paid, fair wages. And the reality of the situation is that actually it's more expensive to use recycled cotton than conventional cotton. So, I really think it's it's about being part of the movement of driving that, and it's not easy. What I can suggest is that it's about finding the right suppliers. These are people that need to have the same values that you have, and also suppliers that are close to home. All of those things really help you reduce, for example, transportation costs, and directly then also trickles down into your emission costs.
I think it's also about slightly 100% agree with everything that's been said. And I think it's also about reframing the value of the garment itself. I think that's where kind of quality does come into play. Is go back slightly. First of all, the consumer is starting to understand that cheap garments is going to have an impact, a big financial impact eventually on the planet, because we're just going to continue to destroy it, and then we're going to have long-term damage that's going to have to be fixed somehow, which at the end of the day is going to at some point come out of someone's tax pay. But I think it's also about kind of reframing the value of the garment itself. And I think that is a crucial component in this, is not just creating garments that have little impact, but also to make sure that the garment itself is long lasting and has a real kind of durability to it. And I think that's obviously fast fashion traditionally has really slightly messed with our idea of value, because yes, we can buy cheap stuff, but on the whole, people are only wearing garments 5 to 7 times before they just throw them away, right? It's literally into the bin. And it's kind of crazy that understanding of kind of like a garment's value has like totally been warped over the last kind of couple of decades of fast fashion consumption. And I think that is a really crucial piece also be when you're thinking about how do you sell as a brand, is you have to understand how to sell the value of the garment. In our case, we also offer, for instance, a lifetime guarantee, so you can send it back to us, we'll fix it, etc. And the way that we manufacture it, yes, it is more expensive, but the amount of value you get per wear would be a lot higher than something that you would traditionally get in fast fashion, where it is a kind of a cheaper made garment, basically. So I think that's also the really important part, again, as a brand, that you start to also reframe the conversation around value, or value per wear.
Brilliant.
I've spent my last 30 years working in quality in broad appeal fashion businesses, and whilst there may be a correlation between price and quality, quite often there's not. And actually, a lot of fabrics, from my point of view, sustainability should be inclusive, and people should be able to be sustainable on their own budgets, and there are a number of ways in which that can be done. We are seeing a small uplift in the cost of sustainable materials. Clearly, at the moment, the demand is growing. Now, that's a positive thing, but it also is actually having some economic effect on the availability of some of the materials. So you mentioned earlier about organic cottons, etc. The availability of organic cottons, etc., is also pushing the prices up. Recycled polyesters, about 55% of our knitwear this season is produced from recycled materials in both acrylics and polyesters. So my advice to the person asking the question here is actually don't give up, because there's new innovations that are coming through that are having an economic effect on the way in which you can select your raw materials. I think knowing what you're buying is really important. That was the point that Edward made earlier, and I think that's really important, knowing what you're looking for, and also having the certifications in place, because it is true that actually you need to be able to verify that what you're buying is the real deal, and actually having the verifiable routes to source are important. And yes, there is an uplift, and I actually agree with everything that everybody's just said in terms of if you're starting a new business, then you would look to produce it locally. But what I do want to talk about is also the innovations that both Laura and Edward are talking about. Actually, the scalability of those innovations is what we're all working towards. So, for example, the Textiles 2030 piece, and there's regulatory pieces coming right facing us, basically extended producer responsibilities, understanding how much waste that potentially is being created is something that we're all facing into, and something that actually is going to drive the innovation in terms of the mechanical and the chemical recovery of fibers and materials to allow those to be produced back into. The issue that we have at the moment, of course, is that a lot of the virgin materials are coming from further afield, and then we are creating the waste here on our own back doorstep. So actually, one of the things we have to identify is how we do that recovery, and we actually create an industry around recycling back to virgin materials.
Brilliant. I'm going to move on to the next question. Ezard, there's a question that seems to be aimed at you, but I think everybody can probably answer this, which is, how do you think new technologies and innovation are going to support the production of biodegradable and high quality garments? I mean, are there things that you're on your wish list for new tech?
So I wouldn't say tech is the answer. Like, the tech is the tool that allows you to kind of perform. I think innovation around materials is probably a better kind of like way of phrasing it. And I think that, again, we use technology to give visibility. You know, it's not that that's the function it performs, and that's what it kind of offers the consumer. I think the exciting piece around innovation of materials has just been talked about by Sue. Is like, there's a lot of very exciting stuff coming out. I think the real trick is making sure that if you're a company, first of all, figuring out what's the right type of material you need for the garment that you're producing. That has to be the starting point. You can't start with a material. You have to start with the type of products you're creating and then figure out, okay, what is now the best material? So in our case, we looked at a lot of new innovative materials, and merino wool, because of the regenerative farming aspects and because of the quality, was the material that made most sense for us. That's not to say that we're not actively looking at lab-grown wool and all kinds of other kind of very cool stuff that's kind of in the pipeline, but it is a slight kind of ways away, basically, still to get that at scale. So again, I think the answer to that question is like technology. You can't. Technology is not an answer; it's a tool. I think you have to look at what you're creating and then really dive into the data. So if you're creating a pair of shoes, figure out what's the best way of making that pair of shoes. What's going to have the customer wear it for a really long time, because again, that's how you're going to be creating the most sustainable item, is if the customer has it for a long time. And so that means it's comfortable, it's durable, looks good, etc. And then kind of work backwards from there. And then the technology piece, again, is what can enable the transparency or the visibility of the supply chain. It can help you optimize your own internal operations as well. We have a whole basically, the layer that we have, the tech layer that we have, also optimizes our order flow. So we make sure that we're not overstocked. We can have just-in-time manufacturing, or pretty close to. So again, we don't create a huge amount of waste.
Either of the other two would like to jump in, Sue, or do you want me to go on to the next question?
No, happy to. There's one comment on there for us. It's in terms of wish lists, or what's really exciting that's coming up is being able to increase the amount of recycled content that can go into the making of a new denim fabric. Right now, we are limited to using 40%, because when you mechanically recycle the fabric, which literally just means that you are just shredding that fabric into small pieces, you end up with a really short fiber. And that has its complications. So when you blend it back in with virgin material, if you have more than 40%, then you start having issues with durability and quality. But then that's kind of a paradox. If you increase the post-consumer, then you have a shitty fabric, and then that's not really good, because then your customer is going to end up with a pair of jeans that will rip really quickly, and then they'll just buy more, which is counterproductive to the whole mission of a circular denim brand, right? So what's really exciting is the innovation that's taking place, and that we're also trying to drive with increasing the amount of post-consumer recycled cotton. And that means that more and more waste can go into making new products.
Brilliant. I'm going to segue into another question, and I'm sorry, Sue, this one is definitely for you. So one of our viewers has basically said, big companies, big fashion companies, do they have a bigger responsibility to take on the sustainability challenge than, say, new startup or small companies?
I think we accept our responsibility as from the point of view of volume, but I also think we have the ability to impact as well. So the impact that we can have, I think one of the things that Edward, I think Mark also you've mentioned, is that the visibility. So I agree with what Edward's saying actually, that visibility of your value chain is crucial basically. And we're doing a little bit of work with UKFT and IBM at the moment that's looking at what those blockchain technologies can do to develop that. But I think the fact that the GDP of many countries and the climate impact in many of those countries is going to be reliant on the big players in terms of the impacts that they can have. There's lots, we could debate this for hours basically in terms of the movement of goods and the movement of raw materials, etc. But I do think that every company of every size, whether you're small or large or whoever, basically needs to be thinking in the same way and joining up. I mean, one of the other things, I'm not disagreeing with anything that Laura and Edward, we are thinking the same way. We're taking different approaches to it, but we are thinking the same way. And I think that's one of the biggest and most important points, is that actually as an industry, all of us have to be thinking like this, basically, and creating the business models that are going to actually have the impact that we need it to have, basically. That's from people and planet.
No, great answer. I mean, one of the questions is trying to ask also about how you manage your supply chain. And just to let the viewers know, a supply chain is usually about 11.5 times the carbon footprint of the actual company. So it makes a big difference if you can actually influence them. So actually, I think this will work beautifully with all three of you, which is sort of, how do you influence your supply chain? I think Sue probably has the more difficult job because you actually have so many different suppliers. And then perhaps, I'm sorry to come to you, Sue, first, but that might lead into the smaller companies.
So when we talk about the value chain, we talk about it in 4 tiers. And I think being aware of those 4 tiers is firstly really important, and actually yes, accepting some all the responsibility actually, in terms of the fact that we work with our tier 1, our principal manufacturing sites. They're buying from their fabric manufacturers. That's probably where most of the environmental impact is happening in terms of water, chemical and energy. And certainly we're working with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition to actually identify through the facilities environmental module and actually gathering the information from those producers of textile material. Those textile producers are then taking from tier 3, the spinners, and then from tier 4, which would be the growers, basically. So from that perspective, we have to work with our suppliers. One of the things that we're finding at the moment is actually, if you think of our value chain as a bit of an egg timer, basically, we know a lot about how we want to buy. The people who are producing the products know how they're producing the products, but we're getting stuck a little bit in the middle in terms of making sure that we have full visibility of exactly where everything's being bought and who it's being bought from. So from that perspective, lots of work going in there, whether it be through the SAC, whether it be through in looking at the blockchain technologies, exactly what Edward was talking about, but on a much bigger scale. And a lot of the big global retailers are involved in this space at the moment to make sure that we have visibility. At its most basic level, what I would say is that in a lot of the manufacturing, in all of the manufacturing companies that we're working with, and the manufacturing countries that we're working with, we also have help of people on the ground. So the other thing that every large retailer needs to be doing is to verify and check and understand exactly how their product is being produced and where it's being produced, and being able to verify those routes to market.
I mean, I think this is fascinating because someone, a company CEO on Monday said to me when we were in this dialogue, he turned around and said, well, actually, the way we're going to save the planet is by making sure the accountants do the carbon and the finance job properly. And it suddenly struck me that it's true. You want to account for all the pieces of carbon, where it's coming, supply chains, things like that. So the weird thing is, sort of like, you may be the fashion heroes, but it looks like the actual superheroes of the sort of like save the planet is going to be accountants. Yeah, shocking. Right. Ezard, you've already talked a bit about how you're managing your supply chain, but are there any things that you can think of that are really smart that you've picked up on the way?
So not something. So talk about smart. I think it's the starting point. It's kind of understanding the average impact of the supply chain, and then almost kind of going like, okay, now here are the real red flag areas, and basically attacking it like that. And I think that's what a lot of people don't do, is they kind of focus on the wrong area, or they don't have the data kind of lead to the answer. For instance, like in our case, we get our wool from New Zealand, and that's because that's where they're really at the forefront of the regenerative farming movement. And we get a lot of comments from people going like, okay, but come on guys, how on earth can you be naturally carbon negative if you are transporting wool from New Zealand? And the answer is actually quite simply is because shipping and transport is far smaller problem than actually the impact of methane and the impact of farming in a traditional wool supply chain. And the reason that we know that is because obviously we've done the analysis, and we've run a full LCA on our entire supply chain. So I think that's the most important piece with all of this, is like to really understand like, okay, this is, if you're a young company, is to go like, here's like I want to create a pair of shoes, I want to create a merino wool sweater. Do an average supply chain. Look at what the average supply chain looks like. Look at the red flag areas, and then you go, okay, those are the areas I'm going to focus on first to really try and improve. And if you're a traditional fashion brand who maybe hasn't done a full analysis, do the analysis and really try to figure out again, where are the huge impact areas? Because I think this is also often where a lot of fashion brands go for the nice marketing, the nice marketing piece, right? When they look at where they can improve impact. Not to pick up something that was just said, but plastic, for instance, looking at it, it's very important to take plastic out of the supply chain, but CO2 emissions is a far, far bigger problem. We don't use plastic anywhere in our supply chain apart from in any of our products, but it is like focusing on that, as we know from a kind of like from a marketing point of view, resonates very well with customers. But it's 100% not the biggest problem when it comes to the fashion industry's impact. Garments, synthetic garments is like non-biodegradability. The fact that so many garments get put on a waste, put on a landfill, don't get recycled. It's only 1% of synthetic garments, whatever the statistic is, get recycled. Yeah. That is a problem. But this idea of kind of like where to put focus, I think, is really crucial. And that starts with having this kind of really robust understanding of either what is your supply chain, what are the pressure points, or if you're about to start a business, where traditionally would I go wrong if I try to create this type of product?
Laura, you and Mud Jeans seem to have a very tight connection to your supply chain. Do you want to quickly talk about how you maintain that control and influence?
Yeah, sure. So Mud Jeans, we really have 4 main supply chain partners. 3 of them are based in Spain. So that's really where the old jeans are recycled. The fiber is turned into yarn, and then the yarn is turned into fabric. Basically, those are the 3 there. And the final one is in Tunisia. Mm-hmm. And that's where in one location, the fabric is cut, stitched, and washed. And that's also very unique for the denim industry, because typically you have that separated into separate locations. So if you look at a map, really, that's all really quite close. And in terms of transportation, we keep it all by land or water. Nothing is flown over. And the partnership that was really built with all of these suppliers has been developed throughout the years. And really the founders of Mud Jeans decided to go and work with all of these suppliers because, going back to the core, they share the values that we have. So very quickly, also being a small brand, there is certain power to it because we had ideas of innovation and things that we wanted to try out. And so they said, yeah, let's try, let's give it a shot. And that's when things started, you start to test things out and you start fostering those partnership relationships of genuine collaboration. And what's really helpful is that then they know, hey, this works. We can, also offer this to the bigger brands. And Just going back to what Sue was saying, sure, the big brands have a very important responsibility over this whole fast fashion climate challenge that we have. But just backing up also her point, we all have to be speaking this language and all have to be having an effort behind this mission, because small brands have the possibility to drive that innovation, and then the bigger brands can take that and then make it scalable. So yeah, we really all fit together like a puzzle. But yeah, and then going back to the original question, it's just fostering those relationships over the years. We've always maintained that relationship, and over the years just push for more and more innovation and grew together. And also this has allowed us to have an LCA that is data specific. So I have data from all of these suppliers plugged in directly into the system. We're not really looking at other data sets. And with that, we can make very specific database strategies of like, hey, we need to do this and this and this better for that continuous improvement, emission reduction, biodiversity improvement, water improvements, etc. So there is great strength in that as well.
I think the point you're making there about the science, I think the science behind this is the new language, basically. And I think that everything we're talking about here is about, as you say, measuring it, knowing the impact, and then knowing where you're going to put your focus, basically, to have that. Because sometimes you're surprised. Sometimes people are surprised when they actually see the full life cycle piece, basically.
Yeah. So Sue, that beautifully, thank you for leading me on to the final question. So you've got about a minute each, and I'm going to go around, and basically you're off the hook. So all I want to know is, what should fashion look like in 10 years' time? If you can wave your magic wand, if you were in control of all the fashion houses, and I really wish you were, what was it going to look like? I'm going to start with Sue, because you basically segued beautifully into that question.
Well, we've got to work together. Secondly, we've got to design for sustainability. I think that's important. We're designing for sustainability, and I think we've got to join up with our entire value chain so that we know exactly where the impacts can be reduced. Okay.
What do you think fashion would look like, though?
I think it would look like a combination of virgin and recycled and circularity, basically. All of it has a part to play.
Brilliant. Edzard, what's it going to look like in 10 years' time when you're a multi-billionaire and basically I'm sort of trying to get your
more hopeful that the planet's in a good place than financial incentive. But yeah, I think that it's a really tough, so more my hope rather than the reality. But I hope, first of all, that the companies are driven towards having a positive impact. I think the dangerous dialogue that started to happen in the last kind of couple of years was the fact that they just wanted to neutralize their impact. And I think that needs to massively change, is where actually companies should be looking to really have a positive impact and, basically become part of the solution rather than as part of the problem. And I think with that also comes something that probably we haven't really talked about, is heavy regulation. Governmental regulation, I think, needs to start kicking in, so that people who are misbehaving, who have a bad impact, who can't prove that they have a positive impact, so not that they can kind of fall back on greenwashing claims. I think that also needs to really start to ramp up, so that it is actually, people are actually doing what they say they're doing. So it's the combination of those two things: having a positive impact rather than just trying to neutralize your impact. And again, the heavily regulated industry. So if people get caught doing anything bad, then they pay a severe penalty.
Brilliant. Laura?
Well, hitting at this question from a different angle, I think the culture of fashion should, and I hope will, change completely into one that respects more where materials come from and value those materials a lot more, where we reduce a lot these values of overconsumption and having the need to always have the newest thing, and more valuing the things that we already have. And of course, staying on topic, circularity, at its core and, on steroids, 100%, fully functioning circular business systems, where we all work together across the supply chain to drive that. Just new business model behind the fashion industry.
Brilliant. Can I actually thank all of you for an amazing session? I'm taking away that we're going to have a completely new fashion culture. We're going to have incredible sort of like clothes that are nature positive. We are going to have the circular economy. We're all going to look really, really good in 10 years' time. I'm taking that away. And I'd just like to say, thank you so much. I'd like to say thank you for the audience for your great questions. And thank you for sticking with us to the fun panel at the end of the day. And at that point, I'm right dead on time. Thank you very much for listening. And I will keep you in touch with COP26 from all my social media. Take care. And thank you, Edards, Sue, and Laura. Thank you so much.
Thank you.